time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James. I'm your host for this morning's show. I'm flying solo because Katie is not coming on until later on with one of our guests. So I'm going to have a very short banter. I'm going to tell you who we've got coming on. We're going to start off the show with my longtime pal, the anarchist, the publisher, the author, the talk show host, Peter Werby from Detroit, Michigan. Then we're going to have Don Rose, the political analyst, talking about the prospects for Democrats, talking about Biden taking too many hits and not deserving some of them, and who knows what else. And then we're going to join Lynn Orion, our musical producer, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her exhibit, Women in the Blues, and other things about music that she's into these days. So get ready for about an hour of interesting conversation. Let me just share a little bit about where this show comes from. Some of you know that both Katie Hogan and I were co-founders and operators of the Heartland Cafe for many, many years. We sold it in 2014. The radio show started much earlier than that. We used to do it during breakfast at the Heartland. After we sold the restaurant, we did it from the Heartland a bit, and we also took it downtown to the WLUW studios. So you get this every Saturday morning live on 88.7 FM and on WLUW.org. Katie and I are both working on a book about the Heartland Cafe, and I think that some of you who listen in might have stories about the Heartland that you would like to share. So my email is fatback, that's FATBACK, at AOL.com. And I got that from a guy named Jimmy Cartier, who was always eating my beans that had salt pork or fatback in them. So send me an email, fatback at AOL. Tell us what you remember about the Heartland Cafe, what you'd like to have on the show more. We'd love to hear from you. I'm going to share a little bit of information now on the COVID. A lot of people are just giving it up, not wearing a mask, kind of taking it pretty easy. I don't know if that bodes well, but in cases in China and Europe, particularly in Germany, they are rising due to the spread of the BA.2 stealth Omicron variant. While numbers are falling to the lowest point since before Omicron surge in late November, experts in the US are cautiously monitoring the potential for a spike in the coming months. Well, stay tuned on that, because the COVID is not gone. We'd like to call your attention to big ad money being spent by rich Republicans supporting a potential candidate for third nominee for governor. Governor Pritzker has deep pockets and appears to be keeping up. We will be talking with Don Rose later about gubernatorial candidates here in Illinois, and he will also probably talk about, and we'll call your attention to, the importance of the Supreme Court races in the June primary. We need to keep a Democratic majority on the Illinois Supreme Court. So those are a couple of things coming up with elections that you're going to want to stay in touch with. And I got one more. A creative donation campaign on social media used the rental app Airbnb to donate $2 million to Ukrainians in 48 hours. Donators from all over the world booked stays in Ukrainian homes with no intention of staying, then paid the full sum of the fee as a form of quick charity for those in besieged Ukraine without access to funds. This is good, and we're really glad about it. So we're going to take a little break, and we'll be right back with our first guest, Peter Werby, all the way from Detroit, Michigan. Thank you, Marvin Gaye. What's going on? Well, what is going on out of Detroit? And we're going to go to Detroit now and hook up with our old pal, Peter Werby, an anarchist, publication guy who put out the Fifth Estate for many, many years, still doing it, and now an author with a great new book called Summer on Fire, a Detroit novel, which I am deeply engaged in. It brings back a lot of memories. Good morning to you, Peter Werby.
Michael, so good to be with you. I sent you a photograph of us in 2012, so it's been 10 years since we've seen each other.
Yeah.
Bad on me. I should get to Chicago.
Well, I should get up there. I think I was up there a couple of times or one time seeing my kids' band Twin Peaks. But I don't know if I ran into you then. I did stay at your place, I believe,
You did.
when there was a conference up there, which goes back even further than 2012.
We go back a long time.
I'll be coming. Anyhow, first of all, let's just real quickly, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but you've always said you're an anarchist. What's your quick definition of what that is?
Well, the historic definition is just without government, is that, once people combine into a nation state and everything that goes along with it, which is generally, wars and a ruling class, things all kind of go to hell. I don't know if I need any more evidence than what's going on now. But it also has to do with autonomous activity, with acting outside of the political arena. It doesn't mean you can't enter it, but primarily, and I know you're a big proponent of this, is self-organization in community. So now it has a lot to do, for instance, Detroit, in community gardens, in independent schools, and so many other ways that people aren't depending on the state to provide answers or solutions to problems.
Last week on this show, we had a fellow named Peter Hudis, and he has a new book he's been editing on Rosa Luxemburg.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot of political theory and a lot of political parties in Poland and Germany and, various places. But what I took out of that conversation with him, and people can see it at youtube.com/Heartland Media, was basically, sure, it's okay to participate in elections, but you also want to stick to your principles and hold them out there.
Yeah.
And, so I'm still being radical, but working in the Democratic Party some of the time. Okay, there.
I don't have any criticisms. I might have 20 years ago, but
that's probably when I'm remembering when we talked about it. But anyhow,
right.
One of the things that I want our listeners and our viewers to know is that you have been publishing The Fifth Estate since 1966, I think. And Tell us what The Fifth Estate is and how you've been able to keep the underground press spirit alive in Detroit, whereas a lot of papers, certainly the ones I was involved with, Rising Up Angry, the Movement newspaper, and the Heartland Journal, those are gone.
Well, 57 years later, we're still publishing with a pretty solid subscriber base. And you can go to fifthestate.org, see the current edition. I'm going to do something really disastrous, which I should have done. I'm just going to reach over here and get the latest issue, which this is the Fifth Estate Anarchist Review of Books. It's got a door that says, "Do not enter without eye protection." And the Fifth Estate was part of the so-called underground or alternative press movement that began in the mid-1960s. And by 1970, there were 500, some people say more, regularly appearing publications that had a weekly circulation of 4 million. And the only one that has remained is the Fifth Estate because of I think a lot of things unique to Detroit and the people that were involved in it. I won't take a lot of credit other than being kind of the workhorse, which, that takes some doing. But if you think about it now, we think, the internet, which, I use a lot. But here, if you had an article about Rising Up Angry at the Democratic Party convention, and you go to fifthestate.org, look in the archive, see all this. In fact, you could type in Michael James, Rising Up Angry, see all the articles. 4 million copies of that could go out, with one message. So in terms of messaging for the left, it was very, very powerful in terms of the impact on people. Where here, you have this great podcast along with how many others, right? 100,000, 500,000. I don't
A
know.
lot.
A lot. Yeah. And I don't mean to certainly to diminish your efforts or my efforts online, but there it was really concentrated. People didn't have newspapers until, as opposed to corporations, until the mid 1960s.
Let me ask you real quickly, what's the status of the Fourth Estate in Detroit? You used to have some newspapers, so they weren't necessarily progressive, but you had them. What do you got left up there?
Well, they still are the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press, but then they are, as you can imagine, severely diminished. Mostly having to do with sports and stuff. It's hard to keep up, obviously, with events. I mean, if you think about 19 up until what up through the 1960s, extra, third extra today. They would put out 3 issues in a day to, if there was like a war. Today, they're, I don't know. I don't know what keeps them alive. I think they only publish 3 times a week anyway. I never read them.
Wow. Yeah, I don't see them much. I look at the New York Times. I look at Washington Post. I look at the Guardian.
Online.
And once in a while, the Sun Times, which is now owned by Public Radio, I think, or at least there's a deal being made here.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And let me just, some of the people who will be watching this probably know that you were also a talk show host for many years.
I was for 46 years, from 1970 to 2016. I had the longest running phone-in talk show in American radio history.
Keep going.
Well, that's all. It was kind of odd. There was not another program like that. This is a unique Detroit feature. What people say, there was no other left wing, people. I used to say I'm an anarchist, atheist, vegetarian, and on this essentially rock and roll, not essentially, a rock and roll station, WRIF in Detroit. And it was just a coincidence of time, the period that it came up in, and that it worked. There was no other station like that, or no other program like that in the United States on commercial radio, which says much, much more about commercial radio than it does about me. I hosted a nationally syndicated show from 2000 to 2003 on a network that the UAW founded and tried to put forth as an alternative to right-wing radio. It lasted about 3 years because all the advertisers ditched us. I'd be on some place in, say, San Jose, California, and the station owner would be getting calls. I'm not advertising on your station as long as you got that communist broadcasting. I said, communist? I'm much more radical than that. Well, one of the things in my book, Summer on Fire, I didn't realize it, but there's a lot about the radio stations of the time, including CKLW and one of the one of the first so-called underground radio stations, WABX in Detroit. But also there's 80, somebody, Sunfrog, don't you? Andy Sunfrog Smith? No,
I don't know.
Not a blues player. It sounds like it, doesn't it? But he counted up and he said, you've got 80 mentions of rock and roll bands and songs and groups. So he put up a Spotify list at my website, peterwerby.org or .com. You can go to either. It also, the book, Summer on Fire, has footnotes because this is a book of fiction, right? But it mentions and alludes to so many historic incidents and people that I thought people also ought to be aware that that certain things really happen. Like right at the beginning, 3 socialists are shot and 1 killed by an assassin, a right-wing assassin. They're different names, different place, different time, but that really happened, and really happened to people that I know in 1966, although I put it in 67. And so that's in there, the real story, for instance.
Well, you've jumped into the book, which is the initial reason why we reconnected and decided to have you on. It's really engaging. Summer on Fire, Detroit novel. And, it starts off with those socialists being shot, and then it goes to a lot of other things that bring back memories of stuff that went on not only in Detroit, but here, the rebellion in Detroit in '67, the rebellions around the country, anti-war marches, police provocateurs. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration for your book and how you went about putting it together, because it is deep. It has a lot of names, a lot of people. Some are real, some are not real, and the facts. I'm not sure what's real and what's not.
Well, some people say, well, I'll give you an example. A neighbor of mine read it, and it's the characters are pretty close to me and Marilyn. And someone said, well, if you didn't want people to think it was you, why did you call them Paul and Michelle? And I said, well, that's a good point. But there's an incident, or not an incident, a scene where Paul and Michelle get on take LSD and get on a motorcycle and ride. And ride to the Grandy Ballroom, where this great rock and roll venue.
I remember the Grandy Ballroom.
Yeah. And so the neighbors said to me, I didn't know Marilyn could ride a motorcycle. And I said, she can't. She never did. And they said, they look stunned. I said, it's not an autobiography. I'm trying to, if anything, it's a biography of a generation, or a memoir of a generation. People did that. And I could have said, Paul and Michelle got in a car and drove to the Grandy. Well, what's more interesting for fiction? Paul's starting to peak, and he's riding this motorcycle and starting to ride like this, So you said the inspiration that, I'm not sure what. Maybe it's just our age, and we start looking back on our lives and we think, did we live ethically? I would say yes. I don't, without being arrogant about it. I mean, sometimes we think, could we have done more? I think maybe, but we did what we could. We did the best that we could, and there's very little. Actually, I always say there's nothing I'm ashamed of. And someone said that is arrogant, but people would
that's good. I agree with you. We did good, and we're still doing good. And there's so much stuff being produced these days. Who knows who's going to look at the past stuff? But in a novel, I think you bring the past up to the present. And at some point in this discussion, you may want to share what you think is relevant from the book then and now. But there's a couple of things I want to get into too about the book.
Well, it's about war. It's about racism. It's about injustice in the courts. It takes place 55 years ago. Have we solved all the problems? I mean, someone said, who did you write it for? Well, the people in some ways the people that I have contact with directly are people like you, that it elicits memories. But I want a 25-year-old that was born, or say I just did a class with this Sunfrog Smith is a professor at a Tennessee college, and everyone in his class was born in the 21st century. It's like reading a historical novel about World War II or World War I for them, right? But I want them to know both the history of the struggle, because we were so inspired by people that, the whole arc of radical resistance and demand for a new society that goes back forever. I mean, we go back to Spartacus, but certainly where we, if I can speak for both of us, into the 19th century and the 20th century, the radicals during that period of great revolutions, from what I say from 1848 to 1939. That's what I call the period of the great revolutions, and then things haven't gone so well since.
Well, one of the things that you did talk about in the book a little bit was Detroit a lot, and you talked about the migration of Southern whites to Detroit, like Southern blacks, to work in the automobile plants. And you do talk about in elections an overlap, not an overlap, but you had the Klan in certain areas, as well as liberal Catholics led by this guy named Mark Murphy, I think.
Frank Murphy, yeah.
Who became a governor and a Supreme Court justice. Tell us a little bit about that, and maybe mention a little bit about the Belle Isle race riot. And then our time will be close to being up.
Okay. Well, real quickly, then, I mean, Detroit has a reputation of being a very liberal city. The home of the UAW, the United Auto Workers, the largest NAACP chapter, and where Rosa Parks lived the end of her life and what have you. But it was also a hotbed of not only the Ku Klux Klan that actually got cheated out of in the way that Gore did, through a miscount of votes. This was in the late 20s. The liberal Catholics, led by Frank Murphy, really kind of cheated. You say you don't like people being cheated out of elections. Well, we won't go. It was also the home of the Black Legion that thought the Klan was too mild, wound up murdering about 30 people. So there's a dual history here of this being now, of course, an African-American city predominantly. But it has, as most cities do, has a long history of shameful racism but also heroic struggle to overcome that.
Yeah, I think that's probably true of Chicago. They always call us the most racist city, but I've always known, Black, Polish, Puerto Rican, Ukrainian, a real crossing over in the city too. And I'm sure that's true in Detroit.
And one of the things I wanted to say just about the book, and it was educational for me. Partly writing it and researching it, but also I realized that almost all of the fictional accounts, and there are next to no nonfiction accounts, are done from what I call a white gaze, Gaze. How we as white people were impacted by this essentially Black event. And, is either most people our age, Michael, they talk about, that's when I got out of Detroit, or, the coloreds went crazy. And, it used to be such a nice city. Well, it kind of was for them to some extent, but it wasn't for Black people. And it still isn't, with all they talk about the Renaissance of the city. There's major water shutoffs here that the United Nations has called some sort of crime. I can't remember, human rights violation. And there's thousands and thousands of home foreclosures on the horizon unless something's done. So it's a nice playground for white people to come in from the suburbs as a restaurant destination city and what have you. But those problems that I talk about in Summer on Fire are still there.
And we got a couple minutes left. What's your take on Michigan politics? We had, in the Trump election in 2016, Michigan went for Trump. Went back to Biden, but you also have right-wing militia guys trying to kidnap the governor. You tend to have a lot of Democrats in high positions, both governor, probably other state offices,
Secretary of State, and all
senators.
that.
But what's your take on Michigan and the prospects? We're going to have our next guest is going to talk about elections, et cetera. But I want to get a little bit from you on what you think we can look.
Well, since 1968, white people have overwhelmingly voted for the Republican Party. So it's a white Christian nationalist party that has a lot of increasingly proto-fascist possibilities if they're not already here. We see that in this constant level of threats of violence and anger, and these incoherent really calls for, quote, freedom. These guys were mad because Governor Whitmer closed the bowling alleys, so let's kidnap and kill her, can't have that. White people have lost their minds.
Yeah, they really have.
Yeah. So that's my take on it. Hey, I just wanted to tell people, and you were probably going to do this anyways, but it's a talk show host in me, that if they want to get my book, right, they can go to either peterwerby.com. If there's lots of places online you can get it. You can order it through your local bookstore. If not, I hate to say it, but you can get it through Amazon if you want as well. There's also an ebook of it and an audio book coming. It's
a really good read, not only for people who went through some of this stuff who are old now, but also other younger people will dig it. Let me ask you, you published it, and then I think you had to reprint it again.
It's in its third printing now, and probably a fourth coming as well. Yeah.
You did good, brother. And I'm
It
going to
did.
finish this book off, and I'm going to come see you in Detroit, and you're going to
Please
come
do.
to Chicago, and we'll have you back on, because I like having on the Live from the Heartland show reports from our pals, our buddies, our comrades around the country about what's going on in their homeland at this time. And then
All right.
Michigan is an important state. The elections in 2022 are not very far away, and we need victories everywhere.
Thank you, Michael. And as we used to say, and it's still, we mean it today, all power to the people.
All power to the people, and we say that at the end of every show.
Do you? Okay, great.
I love
All
you,
right.
Peter Wordby.
Love you too.
Say hi to Marilyn, and we'll see you. And all of you comrades and brothers and sisters and friends and family out there, we'll be right back with an interview with Don Rose talking about elections. You are listening to the Live from the Heartland show on WLUW 88.7. Be right back here on the left end of your dial. Thank you very much. And we'd like to welcome my usual co-host, Katie Hogan, who is joining us for this segment of the Live from the Heartland show on the 19th of March. And we're bringing in our next guest, the incomparable, the one, the only, Don Rose. Good morning to both of you.
Morning.
Don, you've been cranking out these columns every week or so. I read them, and sometimes I write a little note and say, hey, good one. You write back, thanks. And the last two that I read were about things might not be as dire for the Democrats as some, talk show pundits will keep pointing out. And also, you also, in the most recent one, you basically defend someone who you've been critical of, and that would be President Biden. Why don't you start off talking about your defense of Biden in these difficult times?
Well, Biden has, I think, made a series of very, very, what should I say, correct, progressive, and pretty straightforward moves. I actually, far more progressive than many of us expected of a guy who was basically, what I used to call a middleweight, middle of the road guy. And, he has taken on the big issues. Some people, I think, on farther to the left of me on some issues, such as the police, he's made it very clear he is not for defunding the police, and talks a very strong police line, which is very wise. Defunding the police is not going to be a winning issue for Democrats. And whether I never liked the term as it was, because I think we need to readjust things with the police, but not be anti-police. Or certainly I'm not. And he's taken on the question of poverty, which people have only made stabs at. And I can think of little to criticize in his first round that was for the to deal with the pandemic issues, and now the frustrating matter of what was then called Build Back Better, which I never thought was a particularly good slogan, but all of those were well directed and obviously should have been passed, except for these two ridiculous so-called Democrats who stopped things. And actually, if I can jump ahead.
Go ahead.
One of the things that has brought Biden's numbers down, his favorable numbers, is that the Democrats don't look like they can do anything. and they can't provide answers, and he looks impotent in the face of this very difficult situation where the balance is 50-50, and he needs every single Democrat, and any single Democrat can become the co-president. And if we lose in the midterms on that issue, or if that is among the serious issues, we can blame it very clearly on Manchin and Sinema, the two dissenting Democrats. Already he's sabotaged very clearly most of Build Back Better. We may get some pieces of that passed. I think it's important that we do. I think the progressive side made a mistake in denigrating the infrastructure legislation. That infrastructure legislation, under any other circumstance, would have been considered a major triumph that somebody could run for re-election on. Unfortunately, events overtook. We had this very unfortunate withdrawal from Afghanistan. It went as well as it ever could, but it looked very, very bad. And Biden gets the blame for incompetence there when it was actually, compared to what was needed, was a very competent execution. It had to be rough at the edges. There was no way of pulling out of Afghanistan without having all those peripheral problems. So I defend him on most issues.
It seems to me that what you just described, and it goes also to the big lie about the election last November, is that there is a real lack of ability in the American public to recognize competence as opposed to incompetence. We just had the most fair election ever held in our history, with the most people participating. Mr. Trump proved that himself by questioning the results in so many states, right? Which meant they had to prove that their results were real, which meant that it was the best least fraudulent election ever held in our history. And yet we have this wide swath of Americans walking around, hear no evil, see no evil. They don't know what's going on. They're not recognizing Biden's head down, get the work done approach like that you just described, very competent in many ways, simply just doing the job as opposed to getting involved in peripherals. And yet the American public seems clueless.
Well, you can put that to the you can ascribe that to the level of competence in the American public. We have a very, very divided society, and a significant portion of that is blinded by the non-reality of their leadership. I mean, we've had examples of this going back in my period to the McCarthy times, the Joe McCarthy, not Gene. And at one time we were divided over the Soviet Union, which was at least a legitimate ideological argument. But here we've got we're going into our own authoritarian end, and fundamentally, we get down to it. The bottom line is race and the other, and the people who want to believe, who want to find fault, who want to believe that the election was stolen. In their hearts, in a way, they think the election really was stolen because the good white Americans of another era, the mythological era of the 50s or the 40s or whenever, these people genuinely feel they are being displaced by African Americans, Latinx, and anybody different from themselves. They don't like the fact that whites are soon to be a minority.
I think Katie's going to take us to some more local elections, but I want to stick with 2022. First of all, let me ask, do you think that Biden's handling of the Ukraine situation may be helpful for him? And what is your take on 2022? Because the piece you wrote basically said it doesn't look as bad for Democrats as we've been told.
Okay, 2022, historically, and based on the numbers that we see now, would suggest that the Democrats will lose at least the House. There's a little different dynamic going on in the Senate, but they could lose the Senate or they could strengthen in the Senate at the same time as they lose the House, interestingly enough. We can only afford to lose 6 seats. History says ordinarily we would lose 20 to 30, even in a relatively good year. Now, what is going on to make it different? We are getting a little bit, Biden's numbers are down in the low 40s. And since the State of the Union speech and a rallying around the flag, which has happened around Ukraine, his numbers have started to go up. He's still slightly underwater. And I wouldn't worry about the fine numbers, but he's gained back at least half of what he lost, and he looks to be rising because people are agreeing with him on the Ukraine. There may be some people who even want a more vigorous reaction, are ready to start the war, but that's not the minority. Start World War III, but that's not the thing. So he is gaining there. The pandemic is declining substantially, and unless we wind up with another horrible variant, I think he will wind up in another couple of months, getting credit for helping reduce the problems there. Those are 2 of the big things. What is still going against him very strongly is inflation, which is due to the pandemic and due to what's happening in Ukraine. But he gets the blame for it because he's the guy whose face they see on television, and his face they see when they are paying $5-6 at the gas tank. Now, if we can get past that, the economy is otherwise very good. And this is the most frustrating thing of all, is that the economy, if you base it on almost every other metric, job creation, wage increases, low unemployment. It's at near an all-time low. But the gains of that, the gains of the job increases and of the wage increases have been obviated by inflation. So that's I think going to be the final fulcrum. But things are moving slightly in our direction. I mean, we're bounced off the bottom, and we see the light ahead. Now, is it going to all take place within the next 6 months? Or we have approximately 9 months, or 7 months till the election. It's a race against time. It can be screwed up badly again by Manchin and Sinema. It can be screwed up by, to nobody's fault, another variant that gives us a surge in the pandemic. But all I can say is from a very bleak outlook early this year, we see what I call glimmers of hope. Is it a prediction we'll make it? No, it's a prediction that we can make it. And it's obviously to be hoped, but it's tough.
Okay, let's shift to more local. Katie, you got some questions.
Yes, I just got the message that my internet is unstable, so I'm sorry if that happens. So candidates filed their petitions here this week in our first ever held in June primary coming up. Which to you are the important races to win? We've got and which are important races that voters should get up to speed on? There's filling the large shoes of Jesse White. There's the Supreme Court races, the county positions, including Fritz Katy, the County Board of Review. Give us just a general look-see on the local races as you see it that are matching up right now.
Well, the obviously right now, the most important races are to maintain all the Democratic seats that we've got and to pick up the new ones that have been well gerrymandered in our favor. I don't have personal favorites here to talk about yet. I would say almost anybody running, who is in the running for the new Latino-oriented seat will serve well. As I look at the two candidates a little better, I may lean in a direction, but I'm mostly concerned about the U.S. Senate. The Secretary of State, Giannoulias, who seems to be the favorite, has an aura of corruption about him from the last time, and he was one of the few times a Democrat lost a Senate seat, lost a race for the Senate, was because of the air of corruption hanging around Giannoulias. I don't think he'll be a bad Secretary of State. He's a very ambitious guy. I don't think he's an outright crook, but I am concerned that if he is the candidate, we could lose that seat.
Progressive groups have all been endorsing Anna Valencia. What do you think about that?
Well,
it's an alternative.
They've been split. The Bernie Sanders group has endorsed Giannoulias. I don't know why, but my concern about him is not so much how well he'll perform in office or Valencia. It's hard to be a bad Secretary of State. Let's face it. You've got a very, very popular job, a popular thing to do, and except when we had, Paul Powell as a crook putting money in shoeboxes, the job has been well administered unless you turn crooked. I don't think we'll see that. But I am concerned that Giannoulias might lose in a year where I think the Democrats statewide will probably not fare quite as well. I think we'll carry the seats that we're looking for, but because of the Madigan episode and the final indictment there, I think it's going to cost the Democrats votes at the edges, and the Secretary of State's seat is the one that I can see us losing.
We got about 2 minutes left. I want to get your take on how's the mayor doing. She PO'd the police officers and the CTU at the same time. Any take on Trekwinkle and the governor's race? Real quick on them.
I think the governor's race will be closer than expected because of the corruption issue. And I think Lightfoot has been weakened substantially. She's offended just about every group you can imagine, her own friends, her enemies. She's made bigger enemies. But I wouldn't quite write her off yet because her opposition is so diverse that they're going to kill each other off. So I think she'll probably get into the runoff, and then it happens. Then we see whether she's got an extreme left or an extreme right person against her, because there's nobody in the middle to take her.
Okay, Don, I think we're running out of time. It's really great to have you on.
I was just getting started. What is this?
I know. Hey, what about the Supreme Court race? How do we get voters knowing about that? That's fairly important in the two districts that do not include Cook County, where there are two races. You know what I'm talking about, Don?
Yeah. I think there's still enough firepower. They've been redistricted sufficiently so that I think there's still enough firepower for the Democrats to hold those. But in a year where corruption is going to be up there again, there's always a question mark.
Well, it's always great having you on the show. We're going to have you back within the next 3 or 4 months because there's a lot of election stuff going on. And you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Great. Thank you much.
Okay, and we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland here on the left end of the dial. Don't go anywhere. We're going to bring Lynn Orion, our music producer, on, and she's going to tell us about the exhibit Women in the Blues that you may want to see while you still can. Be right back. A lot of you have heard great music on this show over and over, performances live as well as recorded. And the person who makes that happen a lot of the time is our music producer, Lynn Orion, who now you can see in person. Hello, Lynn. How are you today?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, I like being behind the scenes. I'm not always the person in front of the camera, but it's great to see you. And it's great to be here. And I miss you guys. I miss you a lot.
Well, it won't be long till we'll see you in person, but you've had this show going around for a while, and we've talked about it before. It's called Women in the Blues.
Women of the Blues.
Women of the Blues. And it is International Women's Month. So it's a great time to have you on talking about the status of the exhibit. Fill us in. Where is it now? Where will it be? And what is it?
Well, you know what? It was as a photographer, you'll know, and I really consider myself more of a photojournalist than I do a photographer, because I'm always elbow to elbow in the pits with people with really large lenses. And here I am with my small little Nikon, but yeah, well,
this always works, whereas the other cameras don't always work.
It's kind of very, very true, and there's some great cameras in these telephones. But over the years, from Chicago to Mississippi to Memphis, I have always been elbow to elbow with a lot of amazing photographers, and through the years, probably about 15 years now. I've been shooting, the stages, not only women, but men as well, but also, noticed in that journey that the women were not getting the props like the men were. I mean, if you were going to, and as a radio DJ as well, I can attest to that. So I started to do a little more delving into that, and I ended up on the board of directors of the Coco Taylor Foundation, and through that just learned so much more about Coco and her inspirations, and how much of an inspiration she was to women internationally around the world. And so this sort of, in the beginning stages of it, really was my heartfelt gift to Coco Taylor.
So Coco Taylor's in the exhibit. Who else is in the exhibit?
Yes, and that's been very difficult because I've had to choose from different photographers, because obviously many photographers from all over the world have shot, Coco Taylor as well as the other women. So Coco, the photo featured in this show specifically right now, it's scaled down to only 18 photos from about 7 photographers. And we opened it in February at the Cliff Dwellers Social Club, which is across from the Art Institute. It's a private sort of arts club, so it's not open to the public, but there are a lot of, they do a lot of events, and I am happy to meet anybody there that would like to join me to see the exhibit or come for lunch, since I am there through the end of April. And I would love you to come. I'd love Katie to come and see the exhibit.
Do you want to put it out publicly on the air? Who should how to contact you if they want to come see?
Absolutely.
Give us an email.
You can contact me at Orman, ORMAN, music @gmail.com. You could also go to the site, which is womenoftheblues.com. And there you'll see a kind of my one page of photographers. There's now over 25 photographers that are featured. And I actually have, Michael, 100 photos of blues women. And these are all, and it is, what I like to say is it's documenting the past and celebrating the future. So you'll have Coco Taylor next to a young Melody Angel, so the artists that have been inspired inspired these young artists as well. And Shamika Copeland, Mavis Staples, Deetra Farr, Demetria Taylor. It's really cool. I love it.
Are any of the photographs taken by women photographers?
Yes, they are. And
okay.
That is, and I have to be honest, and I am actually looking for more women photographers, and especially women photographers of color. So if you are out there and you're listening to this program, I would love to see your work. I would love you to contact me and let me know, because it's dominated by men as far as photographers go. But there are some incredible women out there like Jennifer Noble, who has a new book out actually called 50 Women in the Blues.
And tell us the website one more time, because that's important.
It's Women of theblues.com or .org.
Okay, great. Now, before we go, I want to ask you, you always impress me how, no matter how you say you feel, and maybe you're tired or you've got some health issues going on, you're still out in the world with your picture getting taken with musicians and politicians. I mean, you got a remarkable energy. And I just wondered if in your traveling around both the city, the suburbs, the country, even the world, what have you seen lately that you want to share and encourage other people to be aware of?
Wow. Okay, there is something, and this really doesn't, well, yeah, maybe it does have to do with Women of the Blues, but obviously musicians coming together for Ukraine. And there is a studio in Chicago that just produced a song called We Sing for Ukraine, which includes Joni Pilato, Lynn Jordan, Nicholas Tremulous, a lot of the artists that we have had on our show,
Right.
Jeff Morrow, and an artist that came here 2 weeks ago, came a refugee from Ukraine, and she is singing lead vocals on this, and it is quite an anthem. It's a beautiful song, and it's called We Sing for Ukraine, and it's on YouTube. And it really touched my heart. I mean, it's just an absolute beautiful song.
Lynn Orion, you're the greatest. And I look forward to talking to you in the next day or so to find out what musical entertainment we're going to have on the show next week and the week after. Well, I know next week we got Kristen Lems coming on, and she has written a musical about Jane Addams and the involvement of Kristen's own family with Jane Addams. And we look forward to that. And you'll be booking plenty of other music for us.
I do want to say one of the things that I am doing is I'm putting together a show that's called, it's Old School Meets New School, Women of the Blues. So I've got like Mary Lane and then Demetria Taylor and Wynn Knoll and some of the legends that are still here, God bless them, on earth. We just lost Barbara Morrison 2 days ago. Mavis Staples teaming up with Bonnie Raitt. So I think that's a really great and important thing to do. And we're going to have a couple of concerts coming up in June.
Lynn Orion, thanks so much for coming on live from the Heartland.
Michael, it's a
Talk
pleasure.
to you real soon.
Thank you.
Okay, we only got a minute or two left, and I'm going to go to a little sports report. We are in the throes of March Madness. There have been some exciting games already. A little college called St. Peter's knocked off Kentucky yesterday. More games to come for the next week or two. Also, baseball is back, and those of you who may have tuned in yesterday saw that the White Sox did defeat the Cubs in the first spring training game. And on a sadder note, Brittany Grenier of the Women's National Basketball Association, future Hall of Famer, and probably one of the best players in the women's basketball NBA. She was busted in Russia with hash oil. Now she plays for a team over there that pays her a lot more money than she makes here in the States. It's owned by an oligarch. The latest news we have is that she is going to be held at least until May 19th, which is after the WNBA starts. And just to remind you, Colin Kaepernick, who began taking the knee in protest to police brutality, still doesn't have a job. And in memoriam, in case you missed last week's show, if you go to youtube.com/Heartland Media and go to videos, or if you just go to that site and type in Dennis Cunningham, you will find our interview with Flint Taylor and Michael Deutsch about our late great friend Dennis Cunningham, the people's lawyer who passed away. So for 25 years, we've been bringing you the Live from the Heartland show. Sometimes it's called Heartland at Home while we are not in the studios, which may happen again soon. We stream every Saturday morning from 9 to 10 Central Time on WLUW.org. You can get us at 88.7 FM. Also good to listen to for other shows, including Bob Maravich, who comes up after us. And you can find us on Spotify and Google Podcasts and Can TV, usually on Channel 27. Our thanks to Katie Hogan, Emilio Davis, Lynn Orman Weiss, Gwen Brown, and Luis Mejia Arens. And I am Michael James, and I look forward to seeing you next week with more Live from the Heartland. So do good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we all do together. All power to the people. Have a great week.